First off, my name is Dave Christie. I am a congressional candidate, not on this side of the mountains, but over probably the district south of Seattle. I've yet to formally announce. But I'm running as part of a national slate of LaRouche Democrats. And as the slate, the idea of running a national slate is that there's no regional solutions right now. This nation and the entire planet is plunging over the cliff. You know, we are headed into a dark age, and the idea of running a national slate is that you've got to recruit and get people to get a sense of what it is that we could do to get out of the crisis in terms of an idea. And then, in a sense, to think, as Mr. LaRouche had described it, you got to think like an architect. You know, you have to actually build it. You know, you have to get a sense of what it is that you need to do, and then figure out how to build your future. And you know, frankly, it sort of dawned on me that the idea of building a future, that is how civilization has happened. It didn't happen according to the market. Right, it didn't happen to the magical, the magic hand of the invisible hand of the marketplace, and just people's passions and desires just sort of made things happen. Right, people have ideas, and they have to communicate those ideas, and they have to have a sense that these ideas are actually going to function, and work. You know, and in one sense, it's a scientific, it's like a scientific experiment. You know, but see, here we're at a situation now, and what we're going to get into is largely around the question of the Arctic development. That this is the frontier here for mankind, and really subsumed under a much larger frontier, which I'll get to in a minute, which is the question of what faces mankind in terms of even just being on this planet. We've seen a lot of the different natural disasters, right? The earthquakes, these crazy, the increased the storms we've seen. We had an earthquake in Washington D.C., which I think maybe God was trying to send a message to some of the D.C. crowd. You better get your act shaped up, but. Anyway, but there's a lot going on in that domain. right. Anyway. But there's a lot going on in that domain that what we have begun to look into is that there's much more to weather, there's much more to terrestrial phenomena that at the very minimum is related to the sun. But in an even deeper sense, you have long-range galactic cycles even that we may not know everything about, but we are beginning to recognize that these types of galactic cycles affect life on Earth. And that really for mankind to exist, I'll at least just make the point that, 6 billion years from now, I think the sun is going to burn out, or 8 billion, I forget the exact number, but it's a long time.
Young too.
What's that?
And we're so young.
And we're young, and frankly, if we're not thinking in that direction, we don't really, if you're not thinking in that direction, you don't really have a concern for the future of mankind. You know? That doesn't mean we're going to be, out of the galaxy here and in the near term, but we have to start thinking in this kind of scope, right? And really thinking of it from a strategic standpoint. And so, what I would propose is that the issue of the Arctic development, which, in one sense, when you start getting up into Siberia, Alaska, the Yukon, I was reading that one of these villages in Russia, near the Sakha region, the village there has an average yearly temperature of negative 45 degrees Fahrenheit, right? So you really are dealing with harsh conditions that we're going to have to tackle, us living up there, us developing this region as if we were going to another planet, because it may as well be another planet. It's that intense of conditions. So in one sense, this question of figuring out the galactic crisis that we face, all the increase of these types of phenomena, some hypothesize that we're going into a minimum activity of the sun, which portends a potential mini ice age within the near term. That the question of the galactic perspective, the question of mankind's future, from that standpoint is really this question of the development of the Arctic. But from an immediate strategic standpoint, we have a limited window to move now on solving the hell that we're rushing into. And now just to hit it as a snapshot, and then we'll come back to it. But Russia has just had a conference about 2 or 3 weeks ago, maybe now, in Yakutsk. This is what we would like to see happen, but there's no rail past that point. There's no rail going out to the Bering Strait. But what they just did is they made a commitment that they're going to build the railroads out there. And so you might think, well, what are they doing? Now, what they're doing is something that Lyndon LaRouche and his wife Helga have fought for decades. And as I'll go through later, the question of a connection between Russia and the United States through the Bering Straits, either tunnel or bridge, there's been various proposals, but this is something that goes back to Abraham Lincoln. It's a very old conception, and it's one that comes through particularly around the issue of geopolitics, the issue of the United States as being a sovereign republic fighting against an empire, and that empire, through various means, has attempted to always make sure that nations never cooperate on a strategic level, that they always can get these nations to fight amongst themselves. People have heard the term divide and conquer, but that's the way this empire has operated. And it's specifically the British Empire, and it's alive and well today. They may not call themselves the British Empire, they just call themselves globalization. Has a nice sounding ring to it, the world is one, right? But it's a world as one where we find cheap labor pools to exploit the hell out of in Africa, South America, Asia, wherever it may be, and we, in the so-called developed world, take all of our advanced capabilities, shut it down, ship it off overseas, all in the name of supposedly to get cheaper products. Well, it's cheaper we have gotten. In fact, I believe it was McKinley who said, the cheaper the product, the cheaper the man. The idea that you cheapen your production, you're going to cheapen the value of your labor. And let's put that in another term. It's not cheapening the value of labor. What you're doing is you're reducing your population to be like animals. So anyway, this question, what the Russians decided to do is they're building their side. And they're building their side not just because what they said about it is essentially, well, we'll build these rail lines up there. We're doing it from the standpoint that we are inviting the U.S. to engage in a strategic partnership with us to develop the Arctic region, right? Because, Siberia all the way over, you're looking at the mineral and resource densities that are amazing. I've heard that at this point, given what we've extracted generally, that somewhere around 40% of the world's resources are up there. I might be wrong on that, but it's a lot, whatever the numbers may be. And that the question of developing this region is going to be crucial for the future here, the immediate future. And so what Russia has said is we'll build our portion of the Bering Straits tunnel, and if the U.S. doesn't partner up with us, well, we'll at least get the gold and the diamonds out, and we'll pay for the project, and no skin off our backs. That's basically what they've said. So now, what is also going on as this discussion is happening, which much of this centers around President Putin, Prime Minister Putin, who will most likely is being vectored to become president again of Russia. But some of his grouping are now moving in this direction. We have then in China, there's also a discussion about Chinese and Russian cooperation around all kinds of, oil and gas development, nuclear development. There's been recent discussions around North-South Korea. I think Hal will probably go through some of this stuff in his presentation. But this perspective, as LaRouche has just recently outlined it, that Russia, China, and the United States, if we make a commitment to say we're gonna develop the planet, we're gonna develop this Arctic region, we're gonna create a new paradigm that is one that is based on pushing these frontiers, the frontiers of we're going to need nuclear, we're going to need high-speed rail systems, including what we have proposed around that if you get an integrated rail system like this, you could actually use the magnetic levitation systems in vacuum tunnels and reduce all of your air friction and run these things at conceivably 1,000 miles an hour. These are just the kind of things that we could be doing, and we should be doing this. So this is the perspective. Is if you get these three nations on this mission to develop this area, create a new orientation, then the nations of Europe, which are presently breaking up or being destroyed under a similar bailout policy, right? A nation like Germany with its advanced engineering and machining capability is going to say, well, wait a second, what are we doing sitting around bailing out Greece and Portugal and throwing all of our money away, shutting down our nuclear power, when over there in Asia they're developing and they need our capabilities. Let's orient towards that, right? So now you have Europe being brought into this Asian development perspective, and not soon thereafter we have the development perspective of Africa as well, right? So this is the point I'm trying to get at, is that we're at the crossroads now of an entirely new strategic economic outlook that we can throw this globalization, the evils of this globalization policy out, and usher in a new era of sovereign nations that cooperate with other sovereign nations based on raising the platform of development up. This is what John Quincy Adams talked about. He had this idea of a community of principle amongst sovereign nations. You can still have global trade, you can still have trade amongst nations, but it should be based on raising the living standards up of these nations, right? So that's the perspective that we want to discuss here today. And I think it's just to be a reference. We've done a lot of work on it, but really this is all being informed by this higher sense that the crisis mankind faces right now, the crisis of the economy, the crisis of dumping trillions into this bailout, and the crisis of the fact that we just had major cities get slammed by the hurricanes and floods, and what we saw with Katrina, and just all this kind of which we don't have the money to rebuild. We're not rebuilding. We're just letting, in some areas of the country, we have raw sewage still floating around in cities. That kind of just neglect that under the Obama administration, under Bush and Cheney before that, with Katrina and whatnot. There's just no orientation to dealing with the physical economic crisis, right? So we face those kind of crises, but the real crisis is, and the long-term crisis, is the fact that there is this galactic crisis. And I'll just mention this. The basic idea at this point is, and we don't know all the mechanisms per se, but every geological record shows that about every 62 to 65 million years, you get these major kills of species. Because as most people know, 97, 98%, 96, whatever the number is, 97% of all species on this planet have gone extinct, right? And those, there usually comes these mass extinction, periods, and then what comes out is usually a change in capability. Like, for example, the reptiles onto mammals. With mammals, you have a much greater capability. We can run around and do a lot more. We require more energy and all this, but so you have these new capabilities coming out of every time you have these kill ratio, or these mass kills, right, where all these species die off at once. So we're somewhere in the ballpark. I don't know if it's 1 million this way or 1 million that way, but of these kind of mass kills. So we better think about how we're going to deal with that, because that's the larger issue, and what we're beginning to see with this kind of major storms and so forth. But so that's what we're saying. We have to begin to think that way. But in the immediate term, we have the crisis of the fact that the entire global financial economic system is coming down hard and fast. As people in this room may know, over the weekend, Obama, under the control of this international financial crowd, sent off Tim Geithner to Europe, and the European banking system is ready to blow, right? So he sent Geithner over there, and Geithner was going to give them the offer that they could take $440 billion of euro bonds that they have saved for the event of a crisis, and bring them back to the Fed, the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve would give them a 10-to-1 leverage ratio, and give them back $4.5 trillion of euros, which by my estimates is somewhere around $6 trillion, to bail out the European banking system. And to be clear, it's bailing out the European banking system. It's not bailing out the nations of Europe, or going in to help out suffering program, health, social programs or something like this, right? This is going in to give the bankers who have been screwing us over around the planet with their their gambling swindles, the derivatives and all this. It's going in to bail that stuff out. So now it turns out that bailout is running into a snag. Partly the Europeans are saying, who are you? When you were going through your crisis, we offered you advice, and now you expect us to take your advice and your worthless money? So it's unclear. At this point, apparently that deal seems dead, but that's where we're at. This bailout policy has brought the world to a grinding halt. There's no money available for anything, yet we have somehow managed to come up with trillions of dollars to put into this banking system, really to bail out the financial paper of which is totally worthless, of the Wall Street and London, the investment banking stuff, right? And now, beyond that, we have just the crisis of leadership, right? So we've laid out very clearly what the steps are to get out of this crisis. Number one, and these two items are one and the same at this point, Obama has to go and Glass-Steagall has to come in. And just to cover it on this question of Glass-Steagall, but hold on one second here. Just so people know it, Glass-Steagall was Franklin Roosevelt's banking bill put forward in 1933. It separated legitimate commercial banking activities away from the investment banking, the gambling racket, as it was then and is now and ever shall be as long as they are allowed to do that kind of stuff, right? And then also insurance was separate. But the point is you wanted to have a functional commercial banking system that was regulated, that made sure that when you put your money there, they weren't going to take it and go gambling on the markets, but that They would just do normal, average, everyday lending. It would be used for the community, the development of the communities, businesses, home loans, student loans, these kind of just good old-fashioned banking, right, to grow the economy, was separate from this speculative financial activity. And in 1999, they tore down Glass-Steagall. It was Greenspan, really, who organized it from the top. Phil Gramm and the Gramm-Leach-Bliley bill was what repealed it. But they tore down Glass-Steagall, and it was off to the races. The mergers began. The investment banks started calling themselves real banks, knowing that they could just start gambling like crazy. And when their bets blew out, like they all knew it was gonna, that they would get the U.S. government to bail them out, knowing that the U.S. government wasn't going to let a banking system collapse, or at least that was their plan, right? So we're now into the fact that we, by some estimates, the head of the former, he was like the inspector of the TARP system. By his estimates, he said $24 trillion of the bailout of all the different types of facilities, the backdoor Fed, loan guarantees, all this stuff. He said 24 trillion. Others have said 17 trillion. Either or, we're now into the domain that it's just beyond the pale. There's no way that we could possibly back that up. We cannot back up those financial claims. So we have fought around the nation to get Glass-Steagall put back in place, which will, under Glass-Steagall, we'll go back to the banks and say, we open up your books, what's legitimate's legitimate, what's illegitimate is wiped off. We'll clean up this banking system and say no more to this bailout, right? And so now that is the first step. And just so people know, we're pushing this internationally as well, the conception. It's got to be led from the United States, but there's been some developments in the last few days. Number one, there's a new prime minister in Denmark who has said that were she elected, she's going to push Glass-Steagall in the Danish parliament, right? And that is directly from the work that we've been doing. We have a crew in Denmark that's been just hammering on the Danish parliament saying, look, this system's in Europe's about ready to go, move on Glass-Steagall type policies. Also, a candidate we are running for the mayor of Berlin, Stefan Tolksdorf, in his fight and just organizing, really all through Germany, but in Berlin especially, you have now, I think he's a member of parliament, I can't remember all the details, but he's now coming out saying we need Glass-Steagall. The Trennbanken is how they term it there. But so in other words, our organizing it's not just nationally, but internationally on this perspective around Glass-Steagall in particular, right? And frankly, I mean, people know it, but the situation in Europe is dire, which goes back to this, that we should be having Europe orient towards Asia, towards this real development perspective. The situation with Greece, there's threats that they're going to bring in the United Nations in to enforce the austerity policy there, resulting from the bailout in Greece. I mean, the whole thing is a mess. So we need Glass-Steagall. We have now the two bills for return to Glass-Steagall in the United States. One put forward by Marcy Kaptur. That has 40 congressmen already signed onto it. The other one is put forward by Hinchey of New York. That has 5 congressmen signed on. 2 of them have signed on to both. So 43 congressmen have signed on to Glass-Steagall. It's because of the fact that this Euro bailout system, the bailout that Geithner was trying to organize, that probably isn't going to go through. And we're now sitting at a moment where people are beginning to recognize that it's only going to be Glass-Steagall as the way out. That has to be coming in. Now, it's not going to go down without a fight. Obama stopped it when Maria Cantwell and John McCain tried to introduce it into the Senate. He tried to crush it when it was introduced into the House again. So that brings us to the other point, that he has got to be thrown out. There are numerous ways in which he can be thrown out, including the violation of the War Powers Act. The war with Libya, there were troops on the ground. It was lies. They said there wasn't. There later came out that we had special ops backing up the CIA. He should be thrown out for that. He should be thrown out for numerous things, but for pushing a fascist agenda, for continuing to push the police state measures set up by Bush and Cheney, for continuing, and frankly as well for his mental state. Guy's a narcissist lunatic, and he has to be thrown out. And LaRouche has harsher words than that, but that's the perspective. Now, once that goes through, we can get to this question of this international development. And I should make the point, too, that with Glass-Steagall, you're not going to solve the crisis on its own, right? You have to begin to restore real value back into the system. And that's ultimately what we'll be discussing with this project today, with both the Eurasian land bridge conception, the integrated rail system, but with NAWAPA. But we also need an immediate bailout of our states and municipalities. That key functions around police, fire, just the normal day-to-day functions of how our cities and states operate are way underfunded. You're going to need a bailout just to keep those functions moving until we can get the actual values up again under programs like NAWAPA, right, or under the NAWAPA system. So effectively, that's what you're dealing with this. That's the way out. This is the 7 steps. Obama goes, Glass-Steagall in. The bailout of the states, the immediate construction of NAWAPA, the beginning of the Arctic development perspective, and as we need to bring in this international perspective of Russia, China, and the United States. And it's on the table now. Now, I would put it to you one way here, which is that this issue of the Bering Straits tunnel, which is going to be sort of to do that, what we're actually affirming is this fight against this British imperial system, against this globalization. And I just want to reference some of the things some of the times where this Bering Straits project has come up. As I said, it was initially proposed. You know what? 1845, huh?
William Gilpin.
Oh yes, yeah. He was a ally of Lincoln, and he had it that the idea that all the great cities of the world would be linked by railroad, and Lincoln was also Gilpin was the first governor of the Colorado Territories, appointed by Lincoln. Now, towards the end of the 1800s, it came up again. The idea that New York, Moscow, and Paris could be joined for world peace. There was an idea that you would have peace through economic development. And then in 1902, there was another proposal of this. But really, to see it in the right sense, go back to 1876, when we had the first, the centennial celebration, where we had people coming into the United States from all over the world, and they witnessed what we had done. You know, the technological innovations, the steam engines, what Lincoln had done with the Transcontinental Railroad. There was this idea that was spreading through the world that you could use this kind of development to fight the imperialism and fight backwardness, fight poverty through this kind of development. And many of these people went back to their home nations with this idea that they were going to develop there too, including Japan, Russia, China. There was this idea that was going to be the future of the world. The Trans-Siberian Railroad, the Baghdad to Berlin Railroad. There was all these proposals being made, and that orientation was when the British said, "Uh-oh, if these nations start moving with this kind of integrated development projects, we're going to lose our empire." And that was the context in which they launched World War I and began this process again of pitting nations against each other, right? So there's been various proposals to do this from a geopolitical standpoint, from a strategic standpoint of peace through development. It came up again in 1942 under Franklin Roosevelt. Harry Hopkins went over to Russia to discuss the Bering Straits Tunnel as a way to get supplies to Russia in the fight against the Nazis. Right? There was also in the 60s under Donovan, who was the head of the OSS, the precursor to our intelligence agency, was proposing as well that we have the Bering Straits Tunnel for peace through development idea, right? So this is not a new idea. It's been an ongoing idea, and we're at a point now where only this kind of perspective of nations coming together again to develop, to see this as the beginnings of not only pushing frontiers of science and technology, but laying the groundwork for space exploration and so on, right? So this is, that is the context in which NAWAPA comes, right? And the development of NAWAPA immediately necessitates the kind of transportation grid to even just get the material up there. And we're going to watch a video here in a minute where we kind of go through a sketch of it just to get a sense of what this is. But this region in particular, Washington State, with the labor force of Seattle, but with the expertise out here at Hanford or the Idaho National Labs, the big core of this is going to be in the Sawtooth Mountains, where we're going to need a pumping system that would require 26 gigawatts of power to bring the water up over the Sawtooth Mountains and to let it drop onto the Great Basin. And so the Idaho National Labs, Hanford, they're going to be absolutely integral to this because we intend to use nuclear power for that kind of very dense, dense power for these pumping systems, right? So I think we should just get it in our minds that this is the picture of what the world could be, and that as architects trying to build this future, we have to just envision it and fight every single day to make it happen. That the NAWAPA and the related transportation and so on, we're looking at the creation of 7 million jobs. We're looking at the fact that this is going to be over probably 30 years of project. Really, in one sense, it begins to go further than that, but that we'll have that kind of stable employment and outlook for the next coming generations. And that we have got to see that vision and fight for it, which means in the immediate terms to get the job done on Glass-Steagall, to continue the mobilization on that, to throw Obama out immediately so that he can't gum up the works, and look to this project as the future of civilization and really as being the platform on which we can begin this question of tackling the Arctic or the galactic problems that we face.